So recently, one thing that I've been thinking about is accepting the fact that I won't be able to read all of the books that I want to read in my entire lifetime. It's just a matter of fact there's going to be libraries of books that I will never get to sit down and read. So it just means that I have to be super selective in terms of what I read. Basically not do what I did in the past and just have a casual look through reviews and buy whatever looks good. Purely because it's such a big time investment. So in terms of ways that I would definitely avoid choosing books is Amazon reviews. I'd say half the reviews, or even more than half the reviews, have never actually read the book themselves. And they're super easily manipulated. So definitely not Amazon reviews. Sunday Times bestsellers are also a big no-no because again, it just measures how popular a book is, not how good it actually is. And another thing I find about Sunday Times bestsellers, especially recently, is that they're very easily manipulated by a lot of influencers who are very popular, but their work isn't actually very good. But they're very good at getting people to buy it and leave good reviews. So in terms of the actual method that I do use to choose books nowadays, it's basically just two steps. So the first step, I'd ask myself, is it likely that in 100 years people will still be reading this book? So for example, if I asked you in 100 years whether you think someone's still going to be reading Eddie Hearn's autobiography or a book called Happy Sexy Millionaire, the answer is no, probably very unlikely. If you have a look at the classics that have stood the test of time, like for example Marcus Aurelius' Meditations, or books by quantum physicist David Deutsch, which really goes deeply into the nature of reality. Books like Black Swan by Nassim Taleb. In 100 years, I would put money on the fact that people would still be reading these types of books, which really have stood the test of time and their ideas stand up by themselves. So number two is just really looking at book recommendations, specifically from people whose opinions I admire. Because when it comes to books, opinions are definitely not equal and it shouldn't be treated as such, like in most reviews. So a really good way I find these is usually at the back of the book, there's usually recommended further reading lists. And what I find is between multiple authors, sometimes you'll find the same books coming up again and again. For example, really fundamental texts on philosophy from people like Karl Popper or Kant and people among those ilk. Or failing that, I'd simply just Google book recommendations by whoever I admire. So for example, it could be Demis Hassabis. And there are websites that specifically track the mentions by these famous people of their favourite books. So for example, Demis Hassabis recommends this book called Gödel, Escher and Bach, which I had never heard of before, but went out and bought the book off the back of that recommendation. And it's been a mind-blowing book, and I would have never heard of it otherwise. And it's a real gem, which is why I really like this method, because a lot of the time these older books, which are absolute masterpieces, but they have like zero marketing budget nowadays, you wouldn't be able to hear of them otherwise. They're not on some Sunday Times bestseller list, they're not at the top of the Amazon book charts, because there is no incentive for people to keep continually pushing these books. So yeah, that's my process for choosing books. And I have to say, in the last 12 months or so, I've read more books that have basically completely changed the way I think than at any other point of my life. So how do you choose your books? I'm really curious to know. Let me know down in the comments.